from the rain and the stone, where the wind has no name and the traveler's alone. There's warmth in the fire and truth in the tale of the watcher who walks where the bold-hearted fail. He carries no sword, yet the darkness gives way to the lantern he lifts at the end of the day. He stands on the watchtower, still and unswayed, where the lost find a path through the fog and the fray. Pilgrim gray, oh steward of the lands, you carry the light in your weather-worn hands. A tale at the hearth, a guide through the night. You open the gate between the wrong and the right.
Through the fog and the fray. You are listening to Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles. Robert Clark, your host. Where ancient rebellion meets modern deception. In truth is a sword in the hands of the watchman. Tonight, we begin a series that's going to pull back the veil on a web of control, deception, and spiritual war that traces back to Eden, Babel, and the days when the sons of God came down to Mount Hermon. Some say 200 of them, but who knows if that's the final number, right? It's not a political expose, but it will involve that, and it's not another elite hit list or celebrity rabbit trail. This is deeper than all of that, and it will affect all of us, and is affecting all of us in many ways. What we're talking about is the infrastructure of Mystery Babylon, the spiritual empire that's been rising piece by piece by piece for thousands of years. And it's at its foundation, we have rebellious spiritual beings that have been around since we're not 100% sure when. May have been in the first two sentences of Genesis. If you subscribe to the gap theory, I could go either way on it. I think it's likely there probably was a prior rebellion, but I'm open to other ideas because they can't be 100% proved. Anyways, these same ones who taught mankind forbidden knowledge, corrupted bloodlines, and built the first false religion, right? And our guide here tonight is the late Fritz Springmeier. In the studying I did for this, I came across several different podcasts, several different articles, and I want to start with Fritz and a podcast I heard of from the Fact Hunter, and I used a transcript from that and basically went down through it, and everywhere I could find a connection, I went in that direction for my searches and tried to include as much information as I could in this first episode of many to come in this genre of warning you by laying a foundation of what's already happened. And I know we kind of already did that with the They series of 3 different episodes, each one an hour or more long. But that was primarily focused on the rebellious angels. And many of you are aware of that information. If you're not, go back and watch those 3. It's listed in my videos. And on the podcast, you can go back through episodes and do a search and you can find them. But this is going to be more merging. The focus is going to be more on merging what they're doing and how it affects this world today, and the merging of it in ways that you probably don't even know are going on. And in fact, I know the vast majority of people don't know what's going on. I encounter people every day on my X page who don't have a clue. They still think that Alex Jones is not a controlled opposition. Things of this nature. I know people know a lot, and there are people who think they know a lot, and I'm not claiming to be all-knowing or anything, but I do find things out, and I don't just causally throw things out there. I dig and I dig and I dig, and I kind of leave the the more questionable stuff out and try to always present to you solid information that can be backed up in the comment section when people say you're full of crap. So when people do that, of course, I take the time and effort in most cases to demonstrate to the person questioning the information presented by listing even further details that I can't necessarily include in an hour-long show. Does that make sense? Otherwise, every show I do would be 4 hours. And this particular show is going to be long enough as it is, and it's going to be at least a 6-part series because there's so much information to cover and so much data, but it's all important data that will help you and friends that you know who aren't familiar with such things to wake up. So, Springmeier, he's a man who exposed elite bloodlines, trauma-based mind control, and many of the secret symbols hidden in plain sight. His work, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, is controversial and raw, and a bit messy, but that's exactly why we're starting here. Because, whether it's through Freemasonry, Jesuits, the Chabad, global finance, or New Age infiltration, it's all the same system. They all have contacts together. They all know each other. They all plan together. Maybe not at the bottom of the anthill, but at the top, I assure you, they all communicate in their various ways. The names and the methods change. The rebellion doesn't. So if you're looking for safe, sanitized information that fits into the evening news, this will not be it. In fact, it'll probably make some of you angry who may be listeners of Fox News or CNN News or any propaganda that's out there, because it's almost everything you hear in mainstream media is some form of propaganda, either giving you controlled opposition information that is mostly right to build up trust so that they can steer the narrative later, which is so deceptive, but it's highly effective. How do I know this? Because people still go to doctors for medication knowing or not knowing that they're the third leading cause of death in this country. And it's probably, if you were to include other factors, much higher than that. But we've all been sold the trust the white lab coat guy. And you don't want to believe that, the world could be this bad, but it is. And I'm not saying this to make you fearful, just aware that you need to be discerning and turn to Jesus for that discernment in Scripture. That is your concrete, solid plumb line to navigate through incredible levels of deception. I'm convinced it's one of the reasons in Matthew 24, Jesus led with, "Let no man deceive you," and then at the end of it, pretty much stated the same thing, because this era would be known and marked primarily by that. So if you're ready to follow smoke into the fire and to trace bloodlines and the blueprints back to the Watchers and their end game, well, then you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Segment 1, the Luciferian blueprint, hidden knowledge and power. So, the first thing the serpent ever sold humanity wasn't an apple. It was a shortcut to divinity. Ye shall be as gods, he said, not by knowing your creator, but by gaining forbidden knowledge. That same promise is the foundation of virtually every secret society ever since. Fritz Springmeier understood that the structure of the Illuminati and every major secret society beneath it is Gnostic at its core. It doesn't offer salvation, it offers graduation. Knowledge in degrees. Truth revealed in layers. Power given to those who are willing to be initiated, sworn in, and bound by secrecy through oaths. So whether you're talking about Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Mormonism, the Watchtower Society, and believe it or not, they're all interconnected. You would not believe how interconnected they are. Or the higher levels of New Age mysticism. The model is the same. It's the same MO. There's always a hidden esoteric truth, a hierarchical system that withholds it, and a symbolic language that conceals it in plain sight. Springmeier saw that this is not just as organizational structure, but Lucifer's blueprint, a spiritual architecture first laid down in Eden, refined in Babel, and replicated across the earth. It was just diminished by the Lord on high so that certain things wouldn't happen before their time. Confusing the languages confounded them greatly for centuries. But I promise you they've built it back up, slowly but surely. In his presentation, Springmeier quotes a murdered ex-Illuminati insider who had a photographic memory. And while Springmeier doesn't necessarily name him directly in this particular talk, based on his writings in the study I did, in some interviews I've read, it is widely believed that he's referring to Cisco Wheeler's contact, a man named Ron Patton, or possibly a variant of his network of informants, such as Daniel, a pseudonym used for multiple mind control survivors tied to the Illuminati deprogramming efforts in the 1990s. A lot of them just use that name, Daniel, for more than one person. The man claimed that the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God in Hebrew, Yod He Vav He, was structurally similar to the chemical formula of DNA. He didn't mean that as a poetic metaphor. He was literally making a connection between the divine name and the structural code of life. And now here's where this gets interesting. Hebrew letters are not just characters, as many of you know. They're symbols with a numerical and pictographic meanings. In an ancient rabbinic thought, Yod, 10, He, 5, Vav, 6, and another He, 5, represent both breath and building blocks of creation. Meanwhile, DNA is built from four bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, arranged in a quaternary code. And some researchers, including molecular biologists with spiritual leanings, have noted that the Hebrew name of God appears symbolically mirrored in the atomic structure of these bases, specifically in their bonding patterns. Now, this idea gained traction through thinkers like Dr. Yitzhak Hayutman, who argued that the Hebrew letters can be seen as archetypal blueprints or sacred code, and more popularly through Greg Braden, who wrote, quote, "If we take the atomic numbers of the elements that form DNA, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon, and assign the corresponding Hebrew letters to those atomic numbers, we get the literal spelling of the name Yahweh." And this is from the God Code 2004. And to be clear, Braden is not a biblical scholar, and his interpretations definitely lean in the New Age. But the basic claim here that there's a numerical or linguistic overlap between DNA, base values, and Hebrew characters has been taken seriously enough to warrant serious counter-analysis, which tells you the idea hit a nerve. So what does this mean in a biblical context? Is it coincidence or code? But to me, it suggests that God's name is not just written in Scripture, it is inscribed in the body. And that lines up with Psalm 139:16, where it says, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." In other words, if the name of Yahweh is embedded in DNA, then the Watcher's obsession with modifying that DNA in Genesis 6 and now through CRISPR, mRNA, and synthetic biology is nothing less than an attempt to overwrite the signature of the Creator. And that, right there, is the ultimate counterfeit. Right? So whether through fallen angel hybridization in Genesis 6 or today's gene editing agendas in transhumanism, the enemy is always trying to rewrite what God wrote in blood, breath, and bone. Now, Springmeier doesn't say that to prove a point. He says it to illustrate how the war of symbols isn't just philosophical. It's also biological. It's spiritual code embedded in everything from scripture to cells. In this system, symbols are weapons. Springmeier writes, quote, "From what I have discovered in Satan's bag of tricks, if he just uses the one tool alone of manipulation of symbols, he has enough power to control our lives," unquote. Now you think about that for a minute. Not through brute force, not through legislation, but just through symbols, images, logos, sigils, architectural layouts, TV graphics, sacred geometry, all of it designed to shift meaning and trigger subconscious allegiance to him. And that is why nearly every secret society requires swearing an oath to conceal their teachings and rituals, because the systems they use, symbols, rituals, sacred architecture, layered initiations, function like ancient temples with inner sanctums. So they're not just visual aesthetics. They are a spiritual technology designed to conceal truth from the masses while initiating the elite into deeper levels of power. You can see this back in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt or Babylon, where only high priests could access the inner chambers, and with it, the hidden wisdom of the gods. They call it gnosis, secret knowledge, that allowed control over spirits, people, and sometimes even life and death. Now you fast forward to modern Freemasonry, and you'll see the same template, 33 degrees of hidden light, layered rituals, and a symbolic layout that mirrors Solomon's temple, but with pagan reinterpretations. The outer court is for the masses, the inner sanctum is for the initiated. It's Babel rebuilt as a blueprint, a spiritual hierarchy disguised as moral fraternity. And what's passed off as a handshake or a floor symbol is often a cipher, one that only those with eyes to see can understand in their world. Now, there's no need to worry if that sounds like a lot, because it is a lot, and it's hard to keep up with. But as this series continues, we will revisit the spiritual temple model again and again, showing how it appears not just in Freemasonry, but in Mormonism, the Vatican, global finance, and even in movements that claim to be quote-unquote Christian. And by the time we reach the final episode, hopefully, you'll not only recognize those symbols, you'll understand the system they serve. So this structure, elite at the top, initiates in the middle, and the deceived masses at the bottom, is kind of Babel in 3D. It is the spiritual pyramid, inverted truth, disguised as wisdom. And at its foundation is the same voice that once whispered to Eve beneath the tree, "Hey, God's holding out on you. Let me show you what he won't." Right? So segment 2, trauma-based control and the splintering of the soul. Yeah. So if the enemy can't erase the image of God in you, he'll fracture it. Right? Some people are already willing to have that image erased by allowing themselves to be genetically altered, basically. They don't realize the importance of God's structure and how important he feels it is. He was willing to wipe out the entire planet with a flood because genetic code and his structure for life had been so altered to the point where there was only one family left on the planet that was fully human any longer, because the rest of the planet, through their genetic alteration, thought evil thoughts continually and had evil actions continually, not just occasionally. Scripture says it was continually. They thought nothing else but evil and acted on nothing but evil, except for one family. One. That's how effective your enemy is. So don't think for 1 minute that we're immune from this necessarily. I think your only immunity comes from recognizing God loves you and reestablishing that relationship with him through Jesus Christ. So in the world of secret societies, fracturing the human soul isn't a side effect. It is the point. One of the most disturbing elements revealed in Springmeier's research is the use of trauma-based mind control by elite bloodlines, not as a myth, not as a movie trope, but as a very real, clinical, systematic form of soul destruction. One form is called Monarch programming, a black project so buried that it officially doesn't exist, allegedly. But those of you who know about it, you know. Its roots can be traced back to Project Paperclip when the U.S. government, well, I think it can be even farther than that, but in its popular form and mass-produced form in our society, I would start with Project Paperclip when the U.S. government brought over more than 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and doctors, laundering their past in exchange for their, quote, expertise. But you know these guys weren't getting their info just from these Nazi scientists. It was coming from somewhere else, which is why Nazis have so many ties to the occult, right? And these weren't just rocket engineers. Some were psychologists and torturers trained in occult methods, and we know where that comes from. It comes from the little g gods who are willing, through permission, right? Because they won't operate without permission from human beings because they know what it will mean for them. So they get permission from you. And some desire this because it results in power and knowledge. Anyway, trained in occult methods of mind fracturing, spirit channeling, and trauma-induced programming. Among them was Joseph Mengele, which we're familiar with that one, the Angel of Death. He became known in later CIA records as Dr. Green, but he wasn't alone. Others include Dr. Kurt Blom, who experimented with chemical mind agents and viruses. How delightful. And then Dr. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I think it's Hubertus Strugold. And it's a name I hadn't heard, and you probably haven't heard either necessarily, some of you, but you should have. Strugold was a top Nazi physician who ran a series of experiments at Dachau concentration camp under the guise of aviation medicine. And what he actually did was torture men to death in the name of science. For example, prisoners were locked into vacuum chambers to simulate high-altitude conditions. Literally, their lungs burst. Their eyes bled. Some were dropped from equivalent heights of 60,000 feet without moving a muscle. Others were strapped into icy tanks and submerged in freezing water to simulate ejection into the sea. They were monitored as their body temperatures dropped, convulsed, and flatlined. No rescue, no anesthesia, just cold, clinical watching to see what happened and monitoring. Now, some of the survivors, if you can call them that, were forced to warm themselves against the naked bodies of women as scientists observed how long sexual contact could delay death. The goal? Well, of course, to build a better pilot, right? And to conquer the skies. But what kind of spirit does this? What kind of being looks into the image of God, another human built in the image of God, and sees a lab rat? And after the war, Strugold wasn't hung like the other war criminals. Nope. He was quietly ushered into the U.S. under Project Paperclip, became the chief medical consultant for NASA, helped launch the School of Aerospace Medicine, and had libraries and research centers named after him. How wonderful, huh? And he was hailed as the father of space medicine, but his hands were soaked in the blood of the tortured. He wasn't just experimenting on bodies, he was warping the soul by pushing the image of God into the furnace and calling it progress. Now, together, their work laid the foundation for what would later evolve into MKUltra, and then into its deepest, darkest compartment, Monarch. So the methodology they used, trauma, symbols, bloodlines, and ritual abuse, bears a very eerie resemblance to ancient accounts of the Grigori, or you probably know them as the fallen watchers of Genesis 6 in the Book of Enoch. In fact, several Nazi occultists claimed they were literally in contact with the Nordic gods, or tall Aryan spirit beings, the same beings modern experiencers now call the Nordic aliens. But they're not aliens. They're the same old deceivers, just dressed for a new age. The Nazi master race doctrine, it came straight from the mouth of those watchers, who in the days before the flood bred hybrid beings to rule mankind and corrupt the image of God. And not just humans. You've seen them. You've seen the statues. You've seen the paintings. You know they made a mockery of what God designed in nature as well. And they taught this to human beings, how to do it. And they're teaching us again today, even though they keep getting punished for it. And we're busy doing CRISPR. Brilliant. There's a reason Matthew 24 says, as in the days of Noah. So in this light, Monarch programming isn't just psychological warfare, it's spiritual continuation of the oldest rebellion. One in which God wiped out the world because of it. Think of that. And I'm sure he's probably about had enough. We can all feel it, right? In the air. We know something's coming. We feel it. So the method is cold and simple, right? Inflict overwhelming trauma, especially during early childhood. Don't be surprised if they don't find many of those kids that are missing, the 300,000 plus that came over the border. They'll find some, but I bet most of those kids will never be the same. Then they fractured the minds that they've traumatized into compartments like rooms in a house. I brought this up with my wife last night, and I was mentioning, they can just fracture the person's mind into 4 or 5 different individuals that they can then have individual 4 carry out some action that they want, and the primary person, individual 1, won't even remember what 3 did. And my wife responded by saying, 3 or 4? Try hundreds. They can fracture people into hundreds of different personalities. So, after fracturing the mind into compartments, they assign roles, codes, and identities to those rooms, and then they use triggers to open and close the doors. And the person they've done this to literally will not remember it. I have read reports that I don't even want to share necessarily because it could create unnecessary fear or panic for your kids. But I read stories where literally your kid goes to a guidance counselor at school and they wind up being involved in something like this and on medications and things of this nature. So they will not remember. It's why you have kids like that poor soul that was probably gone through something like this that shot up a movie theater during Batman and doesn't remember a thing. Now, before I knew about all this, I was like, yeah, right, you don't remember anything, sure. But now, he probably doesn't. And quite frankly, most of the time, they trigger the individual to off themselves so that you can't find out. You might find out that they were on some sort of psychotropic medication, and that's about it. Because most of them have that in common because they're going through this process. So these fractured parts called alters can be programmed, activated, and used to carry out orders, deliver messages, or store secrets, all without the host's conscious awareness. And it's not science fiction. It's science you're not allowed to know about. And it works. The only reason we find out is through leaks and through people willing to risk their lives to get the information out. It's becoming more and more commonplace now because so much has leaked and there have been so many whistleblowers and survivors and people scared for their lives that get out of these things and manage to escape. And they probably have to look over their shoulder for the rest of their life. Now, Springmeyer and his co-author, Siska Wheeler, herself a deprogrammed mind control survivor, document how the system of trauma-based control has been used in Illuminati family bloodlines, CIA black ops like via MK Ultra, and by the way, they predictive program this in movies. So the Bourne Identity and all that other stuff isn't just fiction, folks. Many of you think that that's a crazy notion. It is not, and I believe they have to do this, just like the Lord will warn his people through the prophets before he does an action. Legally, in the courts of heaven, the enemy has to do likewise, but they do it oftentimes through entertainment, so you are completely unaware that they've notified you of what's going on. And so they can continue on in it because you tacitly give your permission to do so rather than praying that it be stopped in the name of Jesus. Anyway, to continue, military beta programming. Hollywood and entertainment, sex kitten slavery, high-level political handlers, all of this. The goal is not just to control the body, it is to shatter the soul. Because a person who has no stable identity cannot reflect the image of God. And a person without memory has no testimony. Nothing real. And the truth is, this wasn't just medicine and medicine turned monstrous. It was a ritual masquerading as research, because to the elite and their fallen teachers, trauma is a gateway. Trauma shatters identity. And when I say trauma, I'm talking severe trauma, like having people killed in front of you or getting a child to kill someone else out of fear. They don't want to, but they do it, and they inflict as much trauma as possible to accomplish this, to the point that the person literally is fractured to escape the severe trauma that you were never intended to be able to face. You literally create a separate part of yourself to be able to deal with the trauma. And they know that once it's shattered, it can be reassembled the way they want. And they've been taught this by your little rebellious G gods, not as a whole image of God, but as a controlled vessel that they can utilize. And this technology, because make no mistake, trauma-based control is a form of occult technology, didn't disappear after Dachau. It was refined. We refined it through paperclip. How sad is that? So it's used in CIA mind control experiments, again, under MK Ultra, which they don't call it anymore. It's something else. And they never get rid of these programs. You cannot trust your government. You cannot trust your agencies. You cannot. I know they're currently in the process of trying to rebuild that trust again through their puppets. And yes, the guy currently holding office is a puppet. Sorry to tell you. None of them. The swamp is the swamp. There is nobody who's going to rescue you from the swamp except Jesus. And he's not Jesus. He has his own connections. And if you don't believe that, just do some minimal research and you'll find it out. Embedded in elite boarding schools and military training programs. Weaponized in entertainment, fashion, and music, where handlers and altars are often hidden in plain sight. So the military-industrial intelligence complex is no longer just about bombs and bullets, folks. It's so much better to have the infrastructure remain in place, right? It's more about behavioral modification, ritual abuse, and technocratic soul engineering. So in a world built by Babel and fueled by Babylon, this is what war looks like now. Info. Occult info. The darkness did not stop with Nazi labs or Cold War black sites. It went home with them. So many of the so-called elite families that Springmeier identifies, primarily the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, don't just use trauma programming on outsiders. They inflict it upon their own children. Ritual abuse, disassociation, satanic ceremonial trauma, passed down from generation to generation to generation like a twisted inheritance. And the goal is to fragment the soul, invite controlling spirits into those fragments, shape the child into a multi-layered vessel, one altar for the family, one for the public, one for ritual, and one for forget it all. And any other that they deem useful, right? And it doesn't stop with individual control. Today, many of the same tactics have scaled. Mass media floods the public with fear and chaos. We all know that. Many of us have awakened to this since 2020. And I would just warn you that they do it on a mass scale these days. That's why the world is getting so weird. Public education instills helplessness and passivity, right? They don't want you rebelling. They don't want you thinking critically. They want you to work for them. And soon they won't even need you for that. They won't. And you'll own nothing and be happy. And manufactured crises, from terror attacks to pandemics, they keep entire populations locked in survival mode, unable to question or resist. But I say resist. Inform yourself, be discerning, say no, and resist. It's not just politics, it's programming, and the blueprint for it all, we've seen it before. The Book of Enoch tells us the Watchers used sorcery, blood rituals, and mind-influencing knowledge to enslave humanity before the flood. By the way, the same word for sorcery and witchcraft is where we get our modern term pharmakia from. Look it up. It's true. So they taught mankind how to channel fear into power, they being the they that I went over the 3 episodes with, the fallen Watchers and their adherents, and how to mask slavery as safety. I'm always reminded, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be. That wasn't just about violence. It was about control through spiritual and psychological trauma. It's not just physical, it's spiritual demolition through psychological splintering. And what began in secret laboratories is now showing up on stages, your classrooms, on screens, and even behind pulpits. It's where they go because that's where the trust is developed so that they can control you. And you might be thinking, well, everything I hear him saying is true. That's part of it. Look, I just had a debate with somebody, and I'm going to continue the debate after this program regarding Alex Jones. Because this person is like, he's always right, though. He's always right. First of all, nobody is always right. But second, of course, that is what people don't understand is they have to develop the trust first. They go where you trust. Just like pedophiles go to where the children are and build up the trust. And when they have it, then they guide and steer and control the narrative, control your thought, make you think about certain subjects the way they really want you to think about it, and control access. They will direct you in one area where it's like, oh my gosh, he was right about this. But that's because they don't want you knowing about something else that they feel might be revealed, so they steer you in some other direction. You see how it works? Anyway, that's why the seed war isn't just about bloodlines. It's about the soul lines, the breaking and remaking of mankind in another image. Another image. Anything but the image of God. And ideally, they would just change you completely genetically, which I think is also going on. But it's very difficult for them to do so unless you're willing to give them permission to put it in your body yourself, which many of you have given them. But that doesn't mean it's too late. Pray. Start praying right now for the help of your Creator through Jesus. So segment 3, the world system pyramid, the double tetrahedron. The seed war isn't just about bloodlines and trauma, it's also about systems built by men but revealed by spirits. Fritz Springmeier outlines 6 core elements of the world system, 6 faces of a counterfeit kingdom. 1, order, the state. 2, wisdom, through cultural values. 3, equity, through the marketplace. 4, justice, through the court system. 5, wealth, through finance and pricing. 6, truth, through the media and the church. On the surface, they look like pillars of civilization. But when you zoom out and you see the pyramid, these 6 realms form what Springmeier calls a double tetrahedron, 2 interlocking pyramids mimicking the structure of heaven, but operating under a different ruler. Lucifer doesn't create, he counterfeits. God's kingdom was designed with justice flowing from righteousness, wealth as a byproduct of obedience, and wisdom rooted in the fear of the Lord. And when I say wealth, I don't mean just financial. The Lord is about wealth in many different ways. Oftentimes, it can be financial reward, but it is also satisfaction in doing something that is righteous or good or obedient. You get wealth of health, wealth of spiritual growth. You see what I'm saying? So you might not have much money, but you're still satisfied and happy regardless of your situation. That is what the Lord brings. Joy and peace like nothing else can give. And if you believe money brings that, ask some of the people who have it and fame and all of it. I think many of them, including very famous people, would tell you otherwise. But in Babylon's system, those same elements are weaponized. Law becomes legalism. Equity becomes exploitation. Truth becomes propaganda. And Paul warned us in Galatians 4:3 and Colossians 2:8 about the stoicheia, the elemental principles or spirits of the world that enslave mankind. These aren't just ideas. They are spiritual forces massed as societal norms. And they work together to form a spiritual lattice or a false matrix where rebellion is rewarded and obedience is criminalized. Good is evil and evil is good. They have done this to societies many, many times. And woe to the society that does that, according to Jesus. So think of it like this. Each layer of society, politics, economics, culture feeds the next one, right? The state enforces the values. The marketplace pushes the pricing of evil. The courts protect injustice. The media buries the truth. The church, in many cases, baptizes it all in the name of progress. And the people believe they're free, but they are debt slaves in a gilded cage. And this is not just bad government, it's Mystery Babylon hiding in plain sight. And while most people fight over the puppets at the bottom, oh, who are you voting for, right? Well, my congressman says this. Oh, did you see such and such in the Senate just lambasting such and such? Yeah, but do any of them ever go to jail? Do any of them ever pay a real price? No. Do any of them ever really do anything? No. They are still carrying out the Novus Ordo Seclorum. I guarantee it. So, while most of the people, again, fight over the puppets at the bottom, the principalities and powers remain untouched and mostly unknown at the top. They let you know about some of the ones that are covering for them. But for the most part, you don't know who's really pulling the strings. You might know some of the organizations, but I would venture to guess if you found out about the organization, there's probably something even more powerful behind it. They're the ones who constructed the spiritual pyramid, and in each generation they find new pharaohs to stand at its summit. So, before going to the next segment, I want to pause here for a second because I know some of you might be asking questions because I've rambled on here, and I'm sure they're good ones. So let's take a moment and answer what I suspect might be some questions you might have, like what exactly is a double tetrahedron and why does that even matter? Well, it's a great question. A tetrahedron is a three-sided pyramid, 4 faces total, but when you interlock them, like I mentioned, one pointing up and the other pointing down, you get a double tetrahedron, also known as a 3D hexagram or a Merkaba in occult circles. It's a three-dimensional version of the Seal of Solomon, a geometric symbol widely used in the Kabbalah, Freemasonry, and alchemical mysticism. To the elites, it ain't just geometry. It's a symbol of as above, so below. They're more familiar with the law of heaven and the laws of heavens and how they operate than many of us are because they have direct contact with beings that came from there. And the merging of heaven and earth by man's will. And Springmeyer says that the exact shape used to structure the false world order. It mimics God's heavenly design, but it is inverted. A spiritual pyramid scheme where every layer is ruled by the one above it, all leading to a counterfeit God at the top. So you might be saying, well, why are you calling these 6 areas a pyramid? Isn't that a stretch? Well, I don't think so. If you take a look at how power flows in each of these areas, government makes laws, order, right? Courts interpret them, justice. Philosophy and education define what's wise and moral, wisdom. The marketplace controls your access to life through regulated equity and debt enslavement. Central banks and financiers determine what has wealth. And media and church tell you this is all the truth through propaganda. Not all churches, but you get the point. So it's not a flat structure, it's a top-down, tiered, and meticulously ordered structure. Each realm props up the next until all authority funnels upward towards an elite few. And that's not a conspiracy theory. It's how Babylon has always worked throughout time. And am I saying that all governments and churches are corrupt? No. I'm not painting with an entire black brush here. There are some righteous leaders. There are true shepherds. But what we're talking about here isn't individuals. It's systems. And those systems have been infiltrated over generation after generation by the same ancient spirit that whispered in Eden and built a tower in Shinar. So Mystery Babylon doesn't need to control every person. It only needs to control the structure from the top. So the structure tells good men to stay quiet. The structure rewards the hirelings and penalizes the faithful. And over time, even good institutions rot from within. And then I mentioned stoicheia, and you might be wondering, well, what are those, and why did Paul warn about them? Well, another good question. The Greek word can mean elements or elemental principles. I mentioned Galatians 4:3 and Colossians 2:8. Paul warns us not to be enslaved again to these elemental forces of the world, traditions, philosophies, spiritual systems that look wise but are actually bondage. The early church fathers believed these weren't just ideas, they were spiritual entities masquerading as cultural norms. So think, the god of commerce behind unjust finance, the god of war behind imperialism, the goddess of reason behind humanism. So these aren't, they are. These are the same fallen beings behind the old pagan empires. They've just changed their names. It's what they do. They're deceptive. So how does that all tie into the seed war? Well, the pyramid isn't just about policy. It's about power over blood. These institutions, the 6 pillars Springmeier outlines, exist to shape destiny, control inheritance, and they determine who gets to reproduce, rule, and reign. Babylon doesn't just want your vote. It wants your DNA, your legacy, and your children. So this is the infrastructure of the seed war. It's a counterfeit kingdom running parallel to normalcy. It's a counterfeit kingdom designed to enslave God's image bearers and preserve the power of those who trace their lineage back to rebellion. And they literally do that. So even if you think this is all a big crock of stinky poo, they don't. And you can read it in their writings. They literally trace their lineage back to fallen gods after the flood and some before. So if this all feels overwhelming, it's okay. It is overwhelming. It's meant to be. But just remember that God has a kingdom too, and the difference is his cornerstone was rejected by men, but chosen by him. And that stone, not the pyramid, will crush every false kingdom in the end, right? Everyone. I wish it was live so I could get an amen. If you're driving in your car or listening, you can say it right now and just tell me about it. So segment 4. Freemasonry, the mystery religion reborn. It's not a fraternity. It's not a charity. Freemasonry is the modern shell of an ancient spirit. The mystery religion of Babylon, rebranded, repackaged, and hidden in plain sight. Some may say BS. I would say do some more research. Many would say that because they know Masons, or they are Masons, and they're not even aware of what's going on at the top of their organization completely. Because the vast majority of them are just useful tools for the ones at the top. And they keep them purposefully ignorant until they observe and decide that some are initiates that are useful to them to move on to the next level. And they trust them. So they move them up. The others, they're probably satisfied just where they're at because they're the ones that will get the promotion. They'll be the one that gets to be the sheriff in town. They'll be the one that, your name won't even be considered because you're not one of them. But they'll get the promotion that you do not. And you'll be scratching your head, what the heck? This guy's lame. Why? How is he getting, Well, it's because you're not one of them. And there's probably an order going on behind it. Especially within government agencies. Or your local government. So, at its surface, of course, it seems harmless. Aprons, handshakes, pancake breakfast, balloons. But beneath the civic smiles is a religion older than Babel. Older even than Egypt. Its rituals, symbols, and oaths trace a spiritual lineage back to the Watchers. Those who descended in the days of Jared. They too took an oath. And it's not speculation. It's written in their own books. They had an oath that was very similar to where we go one, we go all. In fact, you could literally almost reword the oath they took at Mount Hermon that way. So men like Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall, and Alice Bailey, revered by Freemasons and Theosophists alike, have openly declared that Freemasonry is Luciferian in nature. Albert Pike wrote in Morals and Dogma, Lucifer, the light bearer, right? And he also wrote, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness, Lucifer, the son of the morning. Is it he who bears the light? Not Satan, Lucifer, the misunderstood benefactor who gave men knowledge. That's the core lie of the same whisper from Eden, recycled through the temples of Babylon, Egypt, Greece, and now your local lodge. Lucifer's the good guy. And it seems like every ritual is an echo of Eden. The first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason, are designed as an initiation into hidden knowledge. Right? The candidate is blindfolded, symbolizing spiritual darkness, led by a rope as one who is bound, and then made to swear blood oaths, often invoking death for betrayal. Does that sound familiar? Punishment for breaking the oath? I think there were 200 watchers who did the same thing. Then brought into light a false enlightenment, that this light is not Christ, it's Lucifer's light. Gnosis, self-deification, the promise of godhood without submission. It's the tree of knowledge without the tree of life. And what about the G? Right? In the center of the Masonic square and compass sits a prominent G. Most assume it means God. And they're partially correct, but it's not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It stands for Gnosis, the secret knowledge that saves. It also stands for the generative principle, a veiled reference to sexual creative power, echoing ancient fertility cults and so on, maybe even Genesis 6. And geometry, sacred math used to model creation without the creator. It's the merging of Luciferian science and occult sexuality, a twisted trinity at the heart of the lodge. This is why Masons are obsessed with building, not just buildings, if you get what I mean. They mimic Solomon's temple, not to honor God, but to recreate a spiritual gate, a structure designed to house a false presence. Just as Babel reached for heaven, the Lodge seeks to restore the pre-flood union between heaven and earth on their terms. And Freemasonry isn't dead religion. It's live architecture for an ancient spirit. You know, the original mystery religion wasn't a theology. It was more of a plan, right? A system handed down by the Watchers to manipulate flesh, corrupt spirit, and recreate man in a new image, primarily to steal their birthright, because our birthright is this earth and they want it. But they can't have it so long as there are humans to claim the birthright. Freemasonry continues that legacy that they started. It welcomes men into darkness, binds them by oaths, just like they took, and leads them to a light, not to serve God, but to become as gods, determining for yourself what's good and evil. Do as thou wilt, right? Isn't that what Crowley said? And that's always been the goal of the serpent seed. Forget rules, right? God's a big wet blanket. Do whatever you want. And define it any way you want. And then couch it in any terms you want. So even things that anybody else would normally see as evil, it's okay for you because you have a good circumstance or you have an explanation for why the evil you're doing is actually something good, right? Of course. So, are all Freemasons evil or consciously serving Lucifer? No. And that is an important distinction because most lower degree Masons, especially those in the Blue Lodge or first 3 degrees, have no idea what they've joined. To them, it's a fraternity, a charitable club, or some sort of networking opportunity. And it is a networking opportunity because they promote their own. I'm convinced that even some house deals are manipulated so that they can undergird a house, buy it out from underneath you as a real estate transaction and get one of their own to undervalue your house like in a new construction so that you cannot properly come up with the funds. And then one of their own come in and buy out the house from underneath you. That's the kind of trickery and crappery we're talking about that often goes on. And then you wonder, well, why is there so much corruption in government? Well, they don't see it as corrupt. They see it as furthering their own. Just like Thanos in the Marvel thing, he thought what he was doing was great too, right? He had all of his explanations also to wipe out half of all life. And that's what happens to you when you decide you're your own God and you come up with your own justifications for what you do, even though most would see it as evil. It's by design. Freemasonry is structured like an onion. The deeper you go, the more occult knowledge is revealed. Albert Pike admitted that the lower degrees are intentionally misled. And Manly P. Hall wrote that the true teachings are, quote, reserved for the few who pass through the gates of the unseen world. What the heck does that even mean? Right? If not something not good. So while not every Mason is consciously Luciferian, the system itself is. That's the problem. And they're swearing an oath to it. And the spirits behind it don't care if you're aware. They just want you bound to the system and giving your permission. And when they have your permission and your birthright, they can do whatever they want, including taking you over. So you might say, isn't the G just about geometry or God? Isn't that just harmless, whatever? A lot of members are told that, but if you look at the esoteric writings, including Morals and Dogma and Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, it reveals a deeper meaning. Like I said, it's the generative principle, sexual power, and fertility rituals, gnosis or knowledge as salvation rather than Jesus, and geometry, not just to build, but to model reality without God in his writings. So in short, it's not just a symbol of God, it's a symbol of man trying to be God, which is a Luciferian inversion of divine truth. And you might be wondering, why does Freemasonry use the Temple of Solomon so much? Isn't that biblical? It's deeply deceptive. Yes, Solomon's temple was a biblical structure designed by God, but Freemasonry co-opts the outer form while rejecting the inner purpose. So in Masonic lore, Hiram Abif, the temple builder, is exalted as a Christ figure. The temple becomes a symbol of man's own deification. Remember the G? It's really about men being God and their eyes being opened by Lucifer in the garden on. Initiation mirrors a kind of resurrection, but without repentance or faith in Yahweh, the only being that doesn't lie to us, who created us. In other words, it's a form of godliness that denies the power thereof. 2 Timothy 3:5. They mimic the temple to build their own gateway, not to God, but to these same spirits that stood behind Babel and helped to bring about a flood because of their deeds. So why do so many pastors, judges, and politicians join? Because it offers influence, brotherhood, and protection, right? You get the promotion. You get protected from the law, the judges that are in on it. Or you just get a slap on the wrist when you should have gone to jail. Freemasonry operates as a gatekeeping mechanism, especially in law, government, and even churches. Many high-ranking officials join for networking and social prestige or career advancement and are then bound by oaths, rituals, and mutual secrecy. Some are fully aware. Some are just useful idiots, but all are part of a system designed to serve the mystery of iniquity found in 2 Thessalonians 2:7. So what's the big deal about oaths? Well, biblically, taking secret blood oaths is forbidden. Matthew 5:34, do not swear at all. Exodus 23:32, do not make covenants with them. And Masonic oaths often include pledges to have one's throat slit if secrets are revealed, obey Masonic law of a civil or religious authority, to submit to the brotherhood over truth. And these oaths aren't symbolic. So if you're a Mason out there and you're only in the first 3 layers, it's not symbolic and you've got problems. They are spiritual contracts made in darkness, and the enemy takes contracts very seriously. Arguing over the body of Moses because of what Moses learned in Egyptian sorcery. and his knowledge. It's very serious. How serious does God take oaths? Well, from both scripture and Jewish traditions, we find that oaths are never treated lightly, especially made in secret or in allegiance to anything other than Yahweh. You look at Jephthah's tragic vow in Judges, right? Judges 11:30-39. Jephthah swore to God, if you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out the door of my house to meet me, I will sacrifice as a burnt offering. When his daughter came out to greet him, his only child, he felt bound to fulfill the vow. Right? Now, of course, scholars debate whether she was literally sacrificed or just dedicated to temple service. Regardless, the core lesson remains, God didn't ask for this oath, but Jephthah was still bound by it. And Jewish legend sees this as a foolish vow, and they're right. It cost him dearly. Because even if she was burned alive, or not burned alive, she was still sent away and never seen again, dedicated to temple service. And this is because words spoken in covenantal form have power. You may not think so, but that would only be because you're not familiar enough with how the spiritual world operates and how much power you truly have with your words. So Saul and the Gibeonites in 2 Samuel 21, 1-9, Saul broke a covenant Israel had made with the Gibeonites during Joshua's conquest. Even though the Gibeonites had tricked Israel, God still honored the original oath. And when Saul violated it, God sent a famine. David had to make atonement generations later to satisfy the broken oath, showing that God holds nations accountable to sworn words, even if they were made under deception. That's how serious it is. So take it serious. And if you've made one, pray for forgiveness and that the Lord will take you out from underneath it by his grace and through the blood of Christ. And then we have the covenant with death, Isaiah 28, 15-18, where it says, you boast, we have made a covenant with death. When the overwhelming scourge sweeps by, it will not touch us. This prophetic warning is to leaders who made secret pacts, believing they could outmaneuver God's judgment. And God responds with fury. He says, I will annul your covenant with death, your agreement with Sheol, and it will not stand. This is especially relevant to those in secret societies who believe their oaths and allegiances can protect them from divine justice. It will not. It will not. And then we have Herod and John the Baptist, right? Mark 6:22-26. Herod swore to give Herodias' daughter whatever she asked. And she asked for John's head. Even though Herod was distressed, he honored the oath for fear of losing face and murdered a prophet of God. The lesson here is that public or private, spiritual or political oaths can lead to damnation if made outside of God's will. But you can pray and ask God for release from that. So, and he'll know your heart. So it better be serious and not flippant. Jesus' words, let your yes be your yes, Matthew 5:33-37. Do not swear at all. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything more comes from the evil one. That's not a random teaching. It was a direct rebuttal to secret oaths, Pharisaical vow loopholes, and manipulative pacts. Christ basically was warning that oaths open a spiritual doorway, and sadly, Freemasonry walks right through it. So, from oaths to architecture, what have we seen? First, that the ancient enemy, the whisperer in Eden, hasn't changed his voice, only his vocabulary. Sorry, the pollen in the air is making me wheeze a bit, or maybe this smoke from Canada that nobody seems to even be talking about, really. It's like you can't see it in the news, but I've seen pictures of it. I mean, if they're real, if you can trust anything, it seems like Canada's become a hell on earth and all the smoke is drifting south. So in segment 1, we pulled back the curtain and saw that the seed war underneath it all, a cosmic conflict driven by rebellious divine beings seeking to enslave mankind through hidden knowledge. In segment 2, we exposed their method, trauma-based control, mind-breaking rituals, and generational manipulation. The same tactics once used by fallen watchers before the flood. And then in segment 3, we revealed the structure, a counterfeit version of God's divine order built on 6 pillars, forming the satanic geometry of Mystery Babylon, a pyramid that keeps truth trapped beneath its capstone. And now in segment 4, we are going to zero in on the frontline priesthood of the system, Freemasonry, the rebirth of Babylon's mystery religion cloaked in symbols, oaths, and counterfeit light. It isn't just history, it's infrastructure. I'm sorry, we just went over that. I'm sorry. And we're going into segment 5, where I'm going to show you how the hidden doctrines have been externalized. Just as Luciferian thinker Alice Bailey predicted in her book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy. Occultism has come out of the shadows. That's undeniable, right? You can literally see people tattooing occult symbols on their face. And we're going to see a bunch of it here in the area I live because Monarch is in town here shortly. So occultism has come out of the shadows. It now wears the robes of school curricula, church liturgies, and cultural trends. Public education rituals replace truth with seasonal paganism. Churches echo Masonic doctrines and symbols from their pulpits. Pop culture spreads sigils and sorcery through screens, fast food logos, and spellcraft dressed up as fun. So the mystery system isn't just in the temple anymore. It's in your children's classroom, your favorite movie, your Sunday morning sermon. And so segment 5 that we're going to do is going to take us into that world where the sacred has been hijacked and the profane is preached as light. So let's get to it, right? Alice Bailey, in her The Externalization of the Hierarchy, says this: "The day is coming when all religions will be regarded as emanating from one great spiritual source. All will be seen as unified attempts to approach divinity." And that is from Lucifer Publishing, now known as the Lucis Trust. So, from hidden to public, the externalization agenda. In the 20th century, occult elites realize something, and that is that they no longer need to keep their teachings secret. Not all of them, anyway. In the past, you kind of had to be an initiate, tested, sworn, and trusted to hear the inner doctrines in the mystery schools, but now they just teach it to your children. Openly, in school. Alice Bailey, channeling spirit guides she called Ascended Masters, wrote openly that Lucifer's plan was to externalize the hierarchy. He doesn't want to be in kowtowing in secrecy. He wants to be openly worshipped by society and to bring the spiritual structure of the unseen realm out into the open, into systems, into schools, into churches, and into everyday life. She didn't just say this would happen. She helped build the United Nations spiritual foundations to make it happen. Her Lucis Trust, formerly Lucifer Trust, was literally part of the UN's inner spiritual planning group. Today, their materials are still distributed in the UN Meditation Room in New York City. And something else I don't tell you, the externalization is gradual. It's layered. It only goes as far as the public will tolerate. So yes, the idea of all religions coming from one spiritual source is now mainstream. Yes, astrology, energy healing, spirit guides, and elemental rituals are now school-safe content. But the darker rites, the ones involving child sacrifice to entities in exchange for knowledge or power, ritual trauma to manufacture vessels or oikotarians for disembodied Nephilim spirits, or even the consumption of adrenalized blood, those are still hidden to some degree from view, not because they've stopped, but because society hasn't been groomed enough to accept them yet. But it's happening. Instead, all of that is introduced gradually. I'm sure many of us are familiar with how they do it. One example would be through movies like Monsters, Inc., where screams, or then laughter, power the hidden world. Right? This is a hidden in plain sight analogy for adrenochrome. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's horrifying. Essentially, you terrorize, and then adrenaline goes into the blood, and you draw it out, and it's supposed to have properties that create longevity of life, a euphoric rush, energy, strength, you name it. It's probably where legends of vampires come from. I say legends, but I believe they are quite real and have been around since Mount Hermon. Anyway, through countless cartoons, music videos glorifying blood pacts, cannibalism, transformation, and violence against children, you're seeing more and more and more of it. Just waltz through your Netflix and see what most of the movies are about. That is programming you to eventually be numb to it, apathetic to it, accept it, embrace it in some cases, or just look the other way and do nothing about it because it's just entertainment. Some people like watching that, whatever. It's going to become a societal norm eventually. That is their goal. They just desensitize the world and spiritually prepare them. Because Mystery Babylon isn't just trying to externalize rituals. It's preparing you, humanity, to participate in them. Either tacitly or fully. In public schools, didn't just remove God from the classroom, they replaced him. You know, Christmas became winter solstice celebrations with pine symbolism and star worship retained, just stripped of Christ, of course. Can't have that. He's not inclusive. So then we have Halloween is now a school-sanctioned celebration of death, magic, and inversion. An ancient Samhain ritual in costume form. I mean, you can say that it's the feast of the celebration of the saints and so on, but that's not the form it takes today, really. Earth Day replaces Resurrection Sunday in spirit, a reverent ceremony towards Gaia, climate repentance, and human reduction, or carbon reduction, sorry. They don't say human, it's carbon. You're carbon, by the way. So it's not just educational drift, it's liturgy. Modern school calendars now mirror ancient pagan observance cycles, solstices, equinoxes, harvest moons, even ceremonial fasting days. The goal is to train children in ritual patterns over time without them realizing they are participating in a ritual, and their parents. You're just not paying attention. So why target children? Because the enemy understands something modern psychology only recently confirmed. Early trauma rewires the brain. It disassociates identity. It creates compartments. It makes the soul easier to fracture and easier to control. But there's more. In a biblical and extra-biblical text, we see a horrifying pattern. The Watchers corrupted the daughters of men to produce hybrid offspring. Pagan nations sacrificed children to Molech to receive favor, fertility, and power. And in dark lore, the Nephilim spirits, having no rest, seek new hosts, and children, innocent and unguarded, are prime targets. The goal is to break the vessel, shatter the image of God or change it, and prepare a body that can be inhabited or used by rebellious spirits. And oftentimes these people become NPCs that we see roaming around the countryside. And so generational trauma programming begins in childhood, not just to create slaves, but to create doors. Because the seed war is not just about control, it's primarily about access and changing humanity, just like Mystery Babylon intended, right? And then we have churches infiltrated by the craft. Freemasonry didn't just stay in the lodge, it marched right into the pulpit. Because that's where they know you trust someone. And it's the best way to mislead you. By presenting a hero, a pastor, a whatever, an Alex Jones, who can then steer you the direction eventually they want. Give you just enough truth to trust them, and then they gradually steer you into other things or prevent you from learning about others. So, Across Europe and America, Protestant denominations, Catholic orders, and even Christian seminaries have been very heavily influenced by Masonic thinkers like Albert Pike, Manly P. Hall, and Alice Bailey herself. In fact, many pastors have openly joined Masonic lodges despite Scripture's very clear commands against secret oaths and syncretism. Some of the key warnings you might find in a Masonic-influenced church are things like hearing quotes or something along the lines of all faiths lead to God language, where they basically preach ecumenism over truth, which is simply better for everybody to get along and go with one truth, like all faiths lead to God. When we know the truth is that Jesus is the way, and there is no other name under heaven by which men are saved. But they don't like that, and you won't hear that in that kind of a church. Triangle or compass iconography hidden in logos. Emphasis on gnosis or hidden knowledge instead of the gospel. Downplaying the blood of Christ, sin, or spiritual warfare. They don't want you knowledgeable that you're an ambassador here with power, literally an ambassador of Christ with his authority. They don't want you knowing that. Because then you're no longer low-hanging fruit, and it's dangerous for them. And then elevation of light language divorced from Christ, the light of the world, because they believe Lucifer is the light of the world, Prometheus. Worse still, some churches even host Halloween trunk-or-treat events, a full embrace of ancient darkness right in the sanctuary parking lot. I know it seems innocent enough, but just be aware of it. Teach your kids right. If they participate in that, I'm not saying that you're evil or that your kids are evil. I'm just telling you to be discerning and watch. And teach your kids, right? Truth. So some of this occult symbology is just outright in plain sight, right? It's not just in words or policies. The war is being waged in imagery, architecture, branding, gestures, and numbers. Let's break down just a few of those, because we need to wrap this up. The triangle and compass, foundational in Freemasonry, appear in countless corporate logos, from energy companies to tech firms to fashion brands. And these aren't just design choices, folks. They're esoteric ciphers, reflecting the union of opposites, the as above, so below principle, and the creation of order through geometry. Right? We have the black and white checkerboard, often seen in fashion shoots, music videos, and film sets. It originates from the Masonic temple floor. It represents duality, deception, and hidden knowledge. Balance. And that truth is hidden in the interplay of light and darkness. It's why I chose Pilgrim's Gray. Because I don't want to be a part of their black and white garbage checkerboard. I want to be a neutral observer of their BS, aligned with God. That's why I named the band what I did. That's why I named this Pilgrim's Gray Chronicles. The number 33 is a high Masonic rank, and variations of different numbers, like we were watching a show and 3F was on the apartment door, prominently displayed. Third floor apartment, for instance. They're little winks and nods, I guess what I'm saying is that if you look, F is the sixth letter, so 3F becomes 666. See what I mean? That's how they play their little game. Plain sight. And then the one eye symbol, often shown with the other eye obscured, represents illumination through hidden knowledge, or more darkly, allegiance to the light bearer, Lucifer. It's everywhere in pop culture, and it's often used in music videos, posters, and advertising. You see it everywhere. My gosh, if you've watched one Tyler Hansen video, then you've seen this one eye symbol, for sure. And of course, the hand signs, like the OK symbol forming a 666. It shows up constantly, as do stylized handshakes that mimic ancient Masonic grips. And they do it on purpose. It's not just, oh, oops, no. I mean, there could be an occasional oops, but when you see somebody doing that consistently, they're giving a shout out for whatever reason. I don't know because I'm not one of their initiates. And some of it is so secret, it's impossible to fully know unless you're in with them. And if somebody has that kind of insight, please contact me. Come on the show. I would love to discuss it with you and give a warning to people, you know. Some of the darkest theories that, you know, it's highly conjecturable, but who knows, right? But it suggests that certain fallen entities, particularly seraphim-type watchers, have ritually involving the left eye, insert offspring of some sort or some sort of demonic essence into a human host, causing a distinct black eye, usually with the left eye. And it's why the term Black Eye Club circulates in alternative circles. And then, of course, we have the Red Shoe Club, linked to occult elites, and some allege blood rituals involving children. And the shoes being made out of them. And the bizarre symbolism of the frazzle drip face. I don't really want to go into that. It's horrifying and also involves adrenochrome extraction. So these things aren't just conspiracy Easter eggs. They are progressive desensitization tools, spiritual grooming, and they are sympathetic rituals designed to draw consent through entertainment. Because when rebellion is beautiful and blood is abstract and every Tower of Babel is painted like a rainbow, good-hearted people won't know they're worshiping at the altar of demons. It's entertainment. Entertainment only. And that's the point. As with Eden, the serpent doesn't bite, he whispers. So you don't know what's happening, necessarily. That's why God tells you to be discerning, so you're not destroyed from lack of knowledge. Have you ever wondered why major film studios use owls or pyramids or wizards or whatever? It's not because they're just branding, they're initiating you. Owls equal hidden wisdom. You know, think Bohemian Grove or Molech. Wizards, initiates who manipulate reality through knowledge. Fire and ice, duality of Luciferian doctrine. Good, evil is necessary balance. Red plus blue equals purple, and alchemical unification. Golden arches, checkerboards, hidden eyes. You see them everywhere, even on our money, especially in children's media and fast food if you're paying attention. And just like the schools and churches, you don't notice the ritual because it's been normalized. It's just there. It's just on my dollar. No big deal. But it's predictive programming. The masses are slowly conditioned to accept a reality shaped by the occult and call it entertainment. Some might say, well, this is just over-spiritualizing pop culture. It's no big deal. I mean, can't symbols just be a coincidence or aesthetics? Well, that is what the designers hope that you'll think. But in ancient systems from Egypt to Babylon, symbols were never just decoration. They were always spiritual gateways, and only the initiated were allowed to use them. Today, they've inverted that, flooding the world with symbols to normalize participation in hidden rituals. Just stay aware. These symbols don't just pop up. They literally have to confer about them, spend money, have groups that decide what the symbols will be. They don't just like, oh, this looks pretty. No, they spend massive amounts of money coming up with them, putting them out there, and talking about them to make sure it's the right one, the right way, presented properly. Now, some might say, are you saying my church is evil because it celebrates holidays or uses modern branding? No, not necessarily. I'm just telling you to be discerning. Discernment is critical. Many faithful pastors do not realize their denomination or seminary was infiltrated. But I'm just telling you, when a church embraces secret societies, downplays the blood of Christ, and by secret societies, I'm talking about Masons in your church, and preaches unity over truth, it's no longer shepherding the flock, it's training them for slaughter. Just because you're not witnessing it right then doesn't mean that the process isn't beginning or begun, and you've got tares with your wheat. So what can you do about it? You're just one person, right? I mean, that's so often what people say. Well, you're never just one person in God's kingdom, okay? Never. You belong to a body. You need to start with just discernment, listening to podcasts like this or others, and ask God to help you to be discerning and ask him for wisdom. Because remember, Scripture tells you he gives wisdom without finding fault. So you could be a complete jerk. God's going to give you wisdom if you ask for it sincerely, right? Start there. Always start with God first and ask him. And then protect your household spiritually and intellectually. You should be teaching your kids, but if you can't and you're sending them to a school, you should still be teaching your kids the truth. Yes, they might have to go and learn things that you disagree with, but you can explain to your kids, we don't believe this, but because we have to go through this crappy system, if you can't homeschool, you can still teach them the truth so they know what you believe and what is true according to God and his word, right? And then speak boldly but wisely. Ask questions in love, but stop being silent. You're not supposed to have a spirit of fear anyway. If I gave into my spirit of fear, I wouldn't even be doing this podcast. But the Lord builds me up through my wife, through others who encourage. A special shout out to George Hobbs of the Fact Hunter and Flat Earth File podcast, who inspired me to even bother doing this. Not just him alone, but, of the importance of it, to do something, even if it's, doing the things I just mentioned and applying it to myself, but also walking the path as a pilgrim with you, with my lantern out there, right along with you, walking to the end to talk about things, or whether we're standing on the watchtower warning others. That's what the whole show's about, right? Pilgrims walking together. We can sit down at the hearth, at the table, enjoy a meal, and talk and figure things out and be discerning, and then get to those watchtowers and warn others. That's what you do. The equivalent of that is sharing this podcast, liking this podcast, giving it a 5-star rating. All of that is us being at the end and then going to the watchtower. And I appreciate every one of you who not only do that, but then let me know that you have. I love it. It's encouraging, and it lets me know, we're out there and we're doing what we can, right? Every small part, no matter how small, helps. Every small part. Even the small act of listening to a podcast all the way through. So, or I guess, depending on the podcast, I guess that could be quite the chore. I don't know. So let's step back for a moment to wrap things up. From Bailey's writings to schools replacing Christ with solstice rituals, from churches incorporating Masonic imagery to entertaining dripping with symbolic grooming, we've shown that the external world is being shaped like a ritual temple. A temple where man, not God, sits in the holy place, where truth is inverted, where rituals never ended. They just went mainstream, and most people are part of the ritual without ever knowing it. But who leads this? Who lays the bricks and decides which symbols go where? Who carries the torch from the garden to Babel and then into modern banking, media, government, culture? And the answer goes back to blood. Because this isn't just ideology, it's a lineage. The seed war didn't end at the flood, as many of you know. The Watchers, many of them may be imprisoned, but their children, both physical and spiritual, never stop building, and their bloodlines still rule. So in this last segment 6, we're going to follow the trail from Cain to the Committee of 300, from Nimrod to the Rothschilds, and from Babylon to your city's Capitol building. All right? So let's start at the beginning. Cain was the first murderer, right? And the first builder. And Scripture tells us that after being cursed, he went east and built a city, right? Genesis 4:17. Not a tent, a city. And that's important because rebellion wants to be rooted. It wants power, infrastructure, legacy. And from Cain, a line of godless builders emerged. Those who embraced violence, corrupted music and metallurgy, and lived as though the Most High did not see. You can see that in Genesis 4:21 through 22. They were the first blueprint for what the Book of Enoch would later call the Watcher's offspring, the Nephilim. hybrids birthed through fallen knowledge and unholy unions. And my guess is the line of Cain were the ones who made the deal to give up their daughters for info, technology, and so on. Just like our governments today. I don't know what the trade is today. Maybe children, maybe human, the right to experiment, who knows? But here's the twist. Even after the flood washed away the flesh, the spirits of these beings did not die. Enoch 15:8 says, "Now the giants who have been born of spirit and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, demons. These were disembodied Nephilim, cursed to wander, influencing men." Think, in predictive programming terms, of the movie, it was a pirate movie. Remember, I think it was the first one from Disney, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of the movie, but remember, they were spirits and they couldn't satisfy themselves with drink or anything, and they were trying to get rid of that curse. And once they got rid of the curse, they could have regular bodies again and experience the things of the flesh they used to enjoy. And that's what these disembodied spirits do. And they look for the low-hanging fruit. People who aren't anywhere around Christians, right? Somebody that might be a fully knowledgeable ambassador that could send them back to judgment or have to face Christ by rebuking them. So they're going to hang around certain families that don't care about such things. That's why you get generational problems. Now, as Springmeyer points out, certain families sought to reestablish the pre-flood power structure with themselves as kings, high priests, and gatekeepers. And then enter the mystery schools, Egypt, Babylon, and eventually Rome. These bloodlines are by design. Springmeyer identifies 13 core Illuminati families, all interlinked by marriage, financial mergers, and spiritual enlightenment. So does Gary Wayne, by the way. And it's actually, these are just, like I said, core families. There are others. But these are the 13 core ones, and that is the Rothschilds, as we all know, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Onassis family, the Astors, the Bundys. Hard to believe Al Bundy could be one, but I'm just kidding. The Collins family, the Freeman family, the Kennedys, yes, even them. The Lee family of China, the Reynolds. Yes, Nathan, that guy. And he knows it, and that's why he talks about it. The Van Duns, and the Merovingian bloodline, tracing to European royalty. These weren't just rich dynasties, folks. They were chosen custodians of Babylon's legacy, the seed of the serpent, woven through history to oppose the seed of the woman from Genesis 3:15. Their power rests not just on wealth, but on occult loyalty, ritual blood oaths, and ancestral pacts. Because they're involved with the little g gods, the Grigori. Each age has its Tower of Babel, right? A centralized, godless control system. Babylon, to Persia, to Greece, to Rome, to the Holy Roman Empire, to the British Empire, to the American Empire, and then global system. And standing behind each, manipulating kings and currencies, were these secret societies, organized like priesthoods, like the Knights Templar. They funded wars and banks. The Jesuits infiltrated Protestant nations and created puppet kings. The Rosicrucians blended alchemy and Christian heresy. The Freemasons democratized Luciferianism for the Western world. And then the Bavarian Illuminati took the helm in the 1700s to centralize it all. And by the 20th century, all roads lead eventually to organizations like the Committee of 300, a loosely formalized network of power brokers, banking families, monarchs, technocrats, and occultists. Dr. John Coleman's research into this group shows that they have dominance over banking via the BIS, IMF, and central banks, pharmaceuticals like Big Pharma and psychological control, entertainment and media conglomerates, political parties, the left and right alike, folks. You cannot trust any of them. There's nobody outside the swamp. There's just those who lie about being a white hat and whatever. It's good cop, bad cop routine. Nothing ever gets done right, except furtherment of their Novus Ordo Seclorum, new order for the ages. That's all that's going on. And you're just getting a show. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. And I say that 3 times because you're falling for it. Every time you get upset at a lefty or a righty, you're falling into their paradigm. And I get it's frustrating, but remember, those people have been blinded by this world system. They don't know. They don't know. Have mercy on them and pray for them, for their eyes to be open and for the scales to be removed that these people have put there through generations and decades of lying, psyops, and building up trust factors so they can lie to you and you'll believe it. So, religion, ecumenical and interfaith seduction, education through UNESCO, Tavistock, etc. They're Babylon Reborn, dressed in suits. So why bloodlines? Because this isn't just about power, it's about preserving a counterfeit image, a twisted mirror of God's plan. Where God preserved the seed of the woman, Satan preserves the seed of rebellion, his seed. These families believe they are entitled by blood to rule the earth. And that's what it's always been about, the birthright. And through inbreeding, ritual, and even modern genetic technology, they are trying to rebuild what the Watchers once lost and then had dispersed at Babel. As Springmeyer source told him, quote, they believe they carry the blood of the gods and they intend to rule accordingly. So again, even if you think this is all a big crock of steaming bovine scatology, they don't. And it still impacts you. So it's not just about who you know for them. It's about who you come from. So how do we know Cain's descendants had any influence after the flood? Didn't they die in it? Well, the physical descendants of Cain perished in the flood, yes, but the ideological and spiritual legacy of Cain, rebellion, city building, hidden knowledge, and defiance of God continued. Even after the flood, you see Nimrod building Babel and becoming a mighty one, right? Or the Hebrew Gibborim. And it's the same term used in Genesis 6 for Nephilim hybrids, and that's not accidental. They are the famous people, men of renown. Your actors, your actresses, your politicians of that day and our day. Further, Enoch 15 tells us the spirits of the Nephilim became wandering demons, influencing mankind post-flood. So even though the bodies were judged, the spirits and ideologies persisted and found new host. And while the physical descendants of Cain and Nephilim, again, may have perished, their ideologies didn't. You know, you've got even in extra-biblical sources and biblical sources where Genesis 6:4 says there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. After that implies the Nephilim or their kind returned post-flood. Nimrod, a post-flood descendant of Cush, became a mighty one, like we said in Genesis 10:8. The same word in Genesis 6:4. The spirits of the Nephilim, according to 1 Enoch, became wandering demons, and now the giants who were produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. That's your demons. Angels aren't demons. Angels are angels. Angels, if they want to, fallen or not, can assume a human form. They don't necessarily have to avatar or possess an individual, but they can. I mean, Lucifer clearly entered Judas. So they can do either one. But a demon cannot just take on a form of human flesh and appear human. So, in Jubilees and Jasher, we have some clues. Also, in Jubilees 4, 33 through 34, it names Naamah, the daughter of Lamech, of Cain's line, as a possible wife of Noah. Some traditions claim she was spared aboard the ark, possibly to fulfill God's decree of enmity in Genesis 3:15 by allowing the serpent's seed to persist. And I'd like to give a shout out to Justin, Doc Brown, who made me aware of that. From the serpent seed line. I don't know that I'm completely on board with that idea yet, but that is definitely a possibility that one has to consider, right? And so those of you who haven't listened to the Prometheus Lens, his podcast, I recommend it. It is very good, very well done. And my wife and I had a good time with Justin recently, going to Ron Wyatt's brother's thing that he had down in Pittsburgh, Tennessee recently, a couple of weeks back. We had a good time and a good time at lunch with him. He's a great guy. And so while Scripture only names Noah's sons, Jasher 5:13-15 adds this tantalizing line where it says, "And Noah took the 3 daughters of Eliakim, son of Methuselah, as wives for his sons." And these names are ridiculous, so I'm going to struggle through them, but my gosh. "And the name of the wife of Shem was Sedequatelabab." I will spell it out for you. This is just ridiculous. It's spelled Sedequetelebab. You have fun pronouncing that. "The name of the wife of Ham was Naalah Tamoak, and the name of the wife of Japheth was Adotanis, something. I don't know. I would hate to have a wife with that name. Thank God my wife's name is just Amanda." So, though not naming Naamah specifically, some oral traditions equate Naalametek with a preserved line from the pre-flood corruption, saying basically it kept Genesis 3:15 alive for God's prophetic timeline. So the implication of this is that God promised in Genesis 3:15 that there would be enmity between the serpent's seed and the woman's seed until the final judgment. That conflict could only continue if some element of the serpent's line genetically, ideologically, or spiritually survived. So whether through a wife of Noah's sons or through demonic reinfestation and watcher reinvolvement, the seed war picks up right where it left off post-flood. This is just one other option. I don't necessarily subscribe to that view, but I believe it is possibly a valid viewpoint, right? I personally feel like the whole reason Babel was built, well, let me continue on because I go into that. So, in addition to the possibility that corrupted seed survived through one of Noah's daughters-in-law or wife, another strong and widely attested explanation is that a second incursion of fallen angels occurred after the flood. Book of Jubilees 10:1-6 reveals that after the flood, unclean spirits, demons, began tormenting Noah's descendants, and he pleads with God to stop them. In Jubilees 10:8-9, it says, "Only 1/10 of these spirits were allowed to remain on earth under the control of Mastema," a title for Satan. But here's the key. The Watcher spirits themselves were still imprisoned, most of them, but not necessarily all of them, and not necessarily forever. The Book of Giants and 1 Enoch 21 hints that some Watchers may return for judgment, implying they are not completely inactive, and even imprisoned, like a mafioso boss might still influence things. And then, like I was going to mention earlier, the word Babel in Akkadian is Bab Ilu, meaning gate of the gods. And this wasn't just a tall tower, it was a portal project, an intentional gateway to reconnect with the heavenly realms and possibly even to storm them with an assault. So, in 1 Enoch 6-10 and the Book of Giants describe how the fallen watchers had foreknowledge of the judgment. Some may have fled into the deep or into the earth, like the twin giants in the Book of Giants who fled to the east, or to their habitation in the heavens, possibly. Second heavens. Babel may have been their way back in. Right? But apparently they had great difficulty breeding in this age, and God put a limitation on the length of years of life. So, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero, he was 2/3 divine, similar to the biblical Nephilim, mighty men of renown. Nimrod in Genesis 10 is said to become a Gibborim again, not born one, but became one. And that might imply a deliberate transformation, maybe through rituals, hybridization, or technology passed down through occult knowledge. So we have extra biblical echoes of this idea. You know, the Book of Jasher again claims the people of Babel built the tower to reach heaven and make war with God. So it's not like we're just pulling this out of our hat. Jubilees, again, emphasizes how occult knowledge was returning through Ham's line and through Canaan, leading to Babel's sins. And the Sibylline oracles refer to a time when the stars fell again, echoing spiritual rebellion after the flood. So whether through preserved genetics, spiritual infestation, or a renewed incursion, the war never ended, Babel was not just rebellion, it was a strategic campaign to resurrect the old kingdom of the gods, and the same spirits that stirred Babel now influence modern power structures, from the bloodlines of Nimrod to the Rothschilds and the Committee of 300. So where's the biblical support for the idea of bloodlines or elite families with hidden power? Well, Genesis 6, the sons of God corrupted human bloodlines. Deuteronomy 7, 2 and 3, God commands Israel not to intermarry with the nations, often because they're linked to genetic or spiritual corruption. Matthew, Jesus 13, 38, 39, Jesus speaks of children of the wicked one, sown among the righteous. Right? We have the parable of the wheat and the tares. Genesis 10 and 11, the Table of Nations, shows elite families post-Babel, including Canaan, Mizraim, and Nimrod's line, all tied to rebellion and Nephilim activity. Revelation 17, Mystery Babylon is ruled by kings and merchants, a global system of elite control. They're always the controllers, folks. They're always the famous people, the men of great renown. They may not be the kind of giants, or maybe their giant offspring are hidden underground or somewhere else. Or maybe they don't survive in this day and age. Might not be enough oxygen in the air for them. I don't know. All I know is they're still here. Maybe they found a way to genetically remain better hidden. Not as giants, but as normal, somewhat normal humans, right? So you might be asking, well, what's the real evidence that Rothschild or Rockefellers are connected to occultism or ancient bloodlines? Well, Fritz Springmeier did his research, and he draws from public genealogical records linking these families to European royalty, which itself claims descent from the Merovingians, and they were said to be Nephilim-linked. The Rothschilds funded occult and Zionist movements, including financing Albert Pike's Masonic projects. John D. Rockefeller financed eugenics programs, mind control experiments, and the National Education Association steering public thought. You may not want to hear that, but it's only because you were programmed by Rockefeller to think it's an awesome thing, and it isn't. And then multiple elite families are known to marry within their closed circle, and they hate going outside of it, often with ties to Freemasonry, Jesuits, or Theosophy. You either have to be one by blood or organization. Even secular books and whistleblowers like Dr. John Coleman and Carol Quigley admit that these families influence every major global system: banking, education, media, and religion. And you might be thinking, the Committee of 300 is just ridiculous. It's fiction. It's conspiracy theory. But Dr. John Coleman's book, Conspirators Hierarchy, the Committee of 300, is based on insider research and declassified documents. And he describes how the group controls global systems via banking networks, pharmaceutical companies, centralized education, and military-industrial contracts. Links to Tavistock Institute, the Club of Rome, Bilderberg, and the Council on Foreign Relations. It's not a public organization with a website. Are you kidding? Of course it isn't. It's an informal network of bloodlines, institutions, and operatives who know each other and keep their oaths, who share the same Luciferian vision, a new world order, Babel rebuilt. And then you have public figures. If you want evidence that these families still engage in occult rituals, public figures like Marina Abramovich, connected to spirit cooking, openly celebrated by elites, celebrities, you name it, they hang with her. They know who and what she is, and so should you. Then you have the Bohemian Grove. Footage filmed by Alex Jones showed mock human sacrifice before a giant owl. And they all go there, folks. Reagan went there. They all go there. There is nobody at that level who is untainted. So quit falling for it. And then witnesses like Kathy O'Brien, Bryce Taylor, and others describe ritual abuse, blood rites, and child sacrifice involving very high-ranking officials, which I'm hesitant to name so I don't get banned or contacted by one of the three-letter agencies. So symbols and elite events, Olympics, music videos, award shows, you've seen them. They're ridiculous, consistently featuring occult themes. Saturn, Baphomet, the Phoenix, the all-seeing eye. It's all there. It's not just entertainment. You know, we see things like the red shoe phenomenon mentioned in multiple leaks and images, and it's definitely linked to ritual blood initiation. Even if not all members participate, the inner circle appears to still venerate ancient rites. So, what's the goal of preserving that? Well, the enemy seeks to mimic God's covenantal model in a twisted way, where God preserves the line of the Messiah through faith and obedience. These fallen ones preserve their seed by ritual control and heredity. Springmeyer notes they believe they are descendants of the gods, fallen angels, and intend to reclaim divine rule over earth, a Luciferian counterfeit of the kingdom of God. And they believe they can win. Not through direct confrontation, of course. They know they can't do it that way, but through God's kids, us, humans. Your enemy may know not to confront you directly, but what if he gets to you through your kid? You going to fight your kid? You going to take your child, your only son, or your whatever out when they come for you because they've been turned against you? It's much harder than you think, and it's a great tactic. So, it's really about dominion, access to ancient knowledge, and the ability to channel demonic spirits across generations. So you might be thinking, well, if they're so powerful, why have they just taken over completely? Well, 2 words, the restrainer, 2 Thessalonians 2, 6-7, what Jesus Christ did on the cross. God still holds back the full manifestation of evil because he's a good God. Yes, he allows free will choices to be carried out in this world because of true love. It's the only way to have true love. And that invites the opposite of true love. The gospel is spreading and people are waking up. You know, the remnant church, prayer, and the Holy Spirit are actively resisting this system. But their long game is incremental via trauma, propaganda, psyops, gradual normalization of rebellion. And that's why your awareness matters, to be discerning and to ask God for discernment. Truth is your greatest weapon. And you get that from God. And it isn't just anti-Semitic or anti-elite paranoia. Because this isn't about ethnicity or wealth. It's about spiritual allegiance and occult systems. So while some elite families are Jewish by heritage, the Rothschilds financed both Zionist and anti-Zionist movements, proving their allegiance is to power, not scripture. And Jesus himself rebuked, right? Revelation 2:9, those who say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. It's about the spiritual war, not race, not nationality. So how do you fight back against something that's massive? Well, I've already mentioned one thing, right? Resist, pray, don't give into a spirit of fear, be discerning. But I guess it all starts with awareness, listening to podcasts like Pilgrim's Great Chronicles or others. I really enjoy The Fact Hunter by George Hobbs. Know the enemy's playbook. And don't fear. Yeah, okay, so the system's powerful, but it's already been defeated at the cross. We resist by walking in truth, raising godly families, exposing evil, and refusing to participate in its lies. Right? And that's what we do on this show. When you walk with me as a fellow pilgrim down the long winding road that goes ever on to the next inn, to the next watchtower, we're exposing evil together and telling people what they can do about it. Warning, but also telling people what they can do. That's why I appreciate you sharing these things and liking them and giving a 5-star review, supporting us in various ways. And then keep watch. Stay separate. Sound the alarm. You know, their whole world system is seductive, but that fall is coming, right? We know it's coming. And so to close this out, I know you've heard it said that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist. But there's an older trick. The one whispered in a garden, echoed at Babel, and encrypted into every dark ritual ever since. And that is, God is hiding something from you, and I can give it to you if you're willing to pay the price. And that price has always been blood, obedience, and blind allegiance to false light. From the Watchers to Nimrod, from mystery schools to the Masons, from ancient Babylon to global networks today. It's always been the same system wearing new robes. But the good news is this. The pyramid can't hide in the shadows anymore. Its blueprint has been traced, its symbols decoded, its oaths exposed. And we're not just talking about conspiracies, we're talking about the ancient war for the soul of mankind and the rebellion that dared to hijack heaven's throne. And this is only episode 1, folks. We have many more to go to expose this. Right? We're pilgrims, not spectators. And you were not made by God for passivity. You were made to discern. And if you've been stirred in any way tonight, not by fear, we don't want fear to be your inspiration, but by clarity. And you're seeing what the enemy desperately hopes you will never see. That this world system was built like a temple, but it worships the builders, not the creator. So just keep your eyes open, study the signs, test the spirits, because the seed war didn't end with the flood or the cross or the collapse of any empire. It ends when the last tower falls and the true king returns. And until then, we watch, we warn, and we walk in truth. And I just ask that you join us next Monday at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time as we dive into episode 2, where we will go over the Lodge and the Lab Coat, secret knowledge behind science and religion, where we're going to expose how rebellious spirits shaped modern science, hijacked academia, and redefined truth itself. This is the Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles, and the shadows don't like what we're about to reveal over the next few weeks. So get out there, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a shout out, email us if you want to be on the show, let us know, we'll make arrangements. We need to do everything we can to get the message out to others. I am still waiting to be walking around in public and see somebody wearing a Pilgrim's Grey Chronicles hat or shirt or sweater or any of the merchandise we offer. Then I'll know that we've made it. Or if I hear somebody playing our band's music in their car radio or listening to the podcast, I'm totally going to get stoked. And I might crazily shout out a big hooray or huzzah. Who knows? So if you hear somebody do that, a giant huzzah, just know that you heard me. And you'd have to probably be living in the state of Tennessee. Anyway, hope we all have a great work week, and I will see you Wednesday night. See ya. Hey!
Gather round, ye travelers, lend me your ear. A tale of heroes.